We're continuing our study of heaven. We're getting closer to getting actually to trying to get to a description of heaven. Last time, it's been about a month since we've been here, and I want us to review Ezekiel chapter 1 and 2 because there are some parallels that we see here. And that one of the things, if you want to understand the book of Revelation, if you've got any desire to understand it, you got to read the Old Testament. While the book of Revelation doesn't explicitly, clearly reference scripture verses from the Old Testament, the book of Revelation is embedded with imagery and ideas that are found in the Old Testament. As you read the book of Revelation, you'll notice some things that are described, and if you're immersed in the Old Testament, you'll say, I've seen that before, or I've read that before. That idea is paralleled. And so the writer of the book of Revelation, the vision that this writer had, I believe was very familiar with the Old Testament visions. And one of the things we've been doing as we've been doing this study of heaven, we're not just looking at the idea of heaven being the place you go when you die. Because that is not what the description of most of the scriptures in its reference to heaven. In fact, the idea of the heaven being the escape place after you die, it's certainly there, but most of the descriptions of heaven in the scriptures are oriented around the authority and the actions of heaven and the activity of the heavens right now. That's most of the biblical description of the heavens or heaven. It is about what does heaven do now? And that's what we've got to recover when we think about heaven, not merely as a rescue thing, as a thing of I want to go to heaven after I die. It's about truly meditating upon the reality. The power of heaven is working right now. And that's what our concept of heaven should be. It's got authority now. And so, as we look, and I'm going to go through the first part of Ezekiel rather rapidly because we have looked at this previously, but this is taking place. Ezekiel is a priest without a temple because they have been taken in exile, taken to Babylon between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. He's in the land of the Chaldeans, the land of the Babylonians. Now, at the time that he's writing, this is approximately 593 BC. This is about 7 years before the temple's going to get leveled. But here Ezekiel, he can't exercise his job as a priest. In fact, he's in a foreign land, and all of the prophecies are, your people who haven't repented, they're coming to a foreign land. They're not going to be living in the covenant land. They're going to be taken out of it. They're going to be going to exile. And so Ezekiel, as he's already there, and he's wondering, what's going to happen to my people? And in the ancient world, when you were invaded by a foreign nation, they either killed you, and thus you were wiped out of history, or they captured you, took you into exile, and over time you would get absorbed into their society. and your status, your identity, your ability to shape culture and pass down your values is defeated. It's gone. You adopt the values of the place you've been taken. That's the way it has always been done. And that would be the burden and the expectation upon a people that have been taken in exile. We're done for. We will not contribute anything toward the future. Our destiny is to be changed and converted and transformed into just one of the many pagan peoples. But this vision that Ezekiel receives from a heavenly source with a heavenly vision, a heavenly strange encounter, is to remind him God, heaven is still at work even when pagan, foreign powers are all surrounding you. It's almost the idea of Ezekiel. I'm going to make this vision you see be a reminder to you. Don't take life like you just see it with your visible eyes. Understand the powers of heaven are at work. So when you are here in the land, and when more people come into the exile, Ezekiel, you're to be a voice to people in exile. As you go into a land, into a culture where your faith doesn't have power and control, you remain faithful to your faith. In many ways, the United States of America, we no longer, it's done. We do not live in a Christian nation. It has become post-Christian. And it is moving, not only being post-Christian, it also seems to be moving into being anti-Christian. And as we raise our children, as we raise our grandchildren, as we're working with our nieces and nephews, we need to shape them to have a mentality to hold on to the faith, hold on to with a realization the power of heaven is still working among God's people, even though the land you live in doesn't seem like that. And so here in this vision, as he's in this pagan land, he's going to see this incredible vision. And he sees this vision in the midst of a storm. You know, storms are scary. I mean, you know, when we see a storm coming up, it's scary because, especially in the ancient, you know, in some ways we've got it a whole lot better because if we're in the midst of a storm, we have almost a guarantee, even if things go bad, somebody's going to be in emergency services and come and help me. They didn't have emergency services back then. But here in the midst of this pagan land, he sees a big storm, a cloud with fire, and in the midst of this, something is glowing. A glory is happening. He doesn't just think that this storm's going to be a disaster. No, this storm is going to show the glory of God, and he begins to see shapes of beings. It says there in verse 5, within it were figures resembling 4 living beings, and this was their appearance. They had human form, but they also had 4 faces and 4 wings. And so here as the description continues, they've got human hands, and here in verse 10, that's going to be very important to note as we move on into the book of Revelation. As for the form of their faces, each had the face of a man. All 4 had the face of a lion. on the right, and the face of a bull on the left, and all four had the face of an eagle. Here in this picture, you've got a human face. God's heavenly authority through this creature is going to be expressed in some ways in four realms. In the human realm, God is paying attention. God knows what's going on with what happens among humans. Well, what else do you see here? You have a face of a lion, and the lion would represent the wild. You know, we don't think we have a lot of control over wild things, but this reminds us God's heavenly power functions even among the wild animals. But what about the bull? Is a bull a wild animal? No, it's a domesticated animal. So here you get the idea that God is working among human beings. God is working among the forces of the wild, but God's also working among the forces of the domesticated. Things that humans interact with, because humans interact with bulls and cows and things like that. But you also have the face of an eagle. Now the picture there would be the activity in the realm above that we don't have immediate access to. You know, you can't jump up into the sky and grab an eagle and interact with an eagle. No, this is God's. You see the birds flying up above, and that's a realm where we can observe it, but we can't control it. And this reminds us, this face of an eagle is a reminder, God's heavenly work in human society, in the forces of the wild, in the forces of human interaction with the domestic, but also God is working in a realm above us that we can't control, but God's heavenly interaction is there. And here you'll find, as the description continues on in this, you have them moving around with these bright descriptions of things that are going around. And it says here in verse 14, and the living beings ran to and fro like bolts of lightning. And it's the idea there's activity in the heavens above, and there's movement. You've got this strange description here in verses 16 and 17 of these wheels, and we're not going to deal with a lot of detail about what exactly that would look like, but the idea is activity and motion. Heavenly exercise of power is not static and calm. You know, usually when we picture heaven, we think of calm and relaxation. But the thing is, the description of heaven, and this is something I've reminded us in our study for these several weeks, a lot of time this word heaven is actually in Hebrew, and sometimes in Greek, it's plural. Because the idea that you have is you have the idea, you've of course got the earth. This is the realm of humanity. Human beings are made of the earth. This is where we function. But you then have the sky, which in the scriptures, what we call sky, they called heaven. And then you had, up above that, you had what we call space, they called heaven. And then above that, you had the realm of God, which they call heaven. And in these realms, you've got activity. God is working in these realms, and there are spiritual beings working and functioning. And you've got these wheels upon wheels, and then you've got these beings with these 4 different faces that they have, of the man and the eagle and the bull and the lion and all that. But the skies above are places of activity. And the activity in the heavens has implications about what happens here. And so this idea is that when we think of heaven, we don't think of it just in the idea of it being a heavenly rest. When we understand it, that it's the heavens, we understand God's work is going all throughout the created world. And we, as covenant people, need to be aware of these spiritual influences, where we have the spiritual influence that are taking the orders from God above, and you also have spiritual influences that are in rebellion against God. And some of those that are in rebellion against God are influencing people and forces that we interact with. That's why we remind ourselves when we are living here on the earth and we interact with people, for our struggle is not against what? Flesh and blood, but what is our struggle against? Spiritual powers. That's why we need to realize that there are spiritual powers that are influencing the people we interact with. Some of them, it's the same spiritual power that we have. They're filled with the Holy Spirit. They're studying the same scriptures and thus we have a fellowship in a covenant. But those who are unbelievers, those who are anti-believers, when we look at them, we don't see them merely as a human being. A lot of times we just want to look at other people and just think in terms of, well, they're my enemy because they don't believe like I believe. But what we need to understand, these other people have been influenced by other powers, whether directly or whether subtly, and we realize these are people, especially as we are believers in Jesus Christ, these are not our enemies. These are people that need to be rescued from the influence of these spiritual powers that are active all around us in this spiritual realm. And here Ezekiel is seeing and is having an encouragement that God's activity is still going on even as he is in a pagan land. They're moving around, all sorts of things. Now, what we see here, I want us to get to here as they're moving around and having all this activity here. Now, over the heads of the living beings, okay, you've got Ezekiel here on the land. He's got this vision of these wheels within wheels within wheels. He's got this picture of these living beings with the 4 faces and all that strangeness there. But then he sees, now over the heads of the living beings, there was something like an expanse, like the awesome gleam of crystal. You get the idea that there is, he sees and he's looking up. There's something above even these powers of a crystal-looking, expanded sort of, in some ways you could say, a glass ceiling. And so he's seeing this he's seeing this activity here, and he's beginning to realize the spiritual power is, yes, it is above, but there's something even above these spiritual beings in the heavens above. And he hears the sounds, and their activity is like, it says there in verse 24, like the voice of the Almighty. It is a powerful, thundering type of voice. And then we have here in verse 25, and there came a voice from above the expanse that was over their heads. Whenever they stood still, they dropped their wings. Here, this voice that's even above this, this would be enough of a experience that totally rattle you if we were to see this ourselves. But here, this is reminded there is a power even above these spiritual powers in the heavens above. There came a voice from above the expanse that was over their heads. Whenever they stood still, they dropped their wings. So you get the sense that these beings pay attention to the power that's even above them. Now, above the expanse that was over their heads, there was something resembling a throne, like lapis lazuli in appearance. And on that which resembled a throne, high up was a figure with the appearance of a man. So here Ezekiel is seeing through this expanse, and he's seeing this throne-like vision, and this man-like figure up here, but he doesn't give an extensive description of it. Then I noticed from the appearance of his loins and upwards something like glowing metal that looked like fire all around within it. And from the appearance of his loins and downward, I saw something like fire. And there was a radiance around him, as the appearance of the rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day. So was the appearance of the surrounding radiance. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And so what he sees here in this experience up above, he sees a rainbow, in fact maybe even a type of halo that's around him, that's multicolored, almost with the picture of colors we've never seen before. And so as he's describing this, such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord, and when I saw it, I fell on my face and heard a voice speaking. See, it's one thing for us to experience all the influences that we have in this life. And, we have lots of people. We've got lots of people who with power, people claiming to have power, like kings and all this. And a lot of times our attitude seems to be that, well, these people are the ones that are shaping life. These are the ones that are influencing me and my kids. And I've just got to look for, where are the people with power? Well, it's the president. It's the congressman. It's the people with money. It's the people that have got the green in their bank accounts. Those are the people with power. But what this vision that Ezekiel is experiencing, he's realizing there are other powers that influence things. There are spiritual powers. And then here, even above those spiritual powers, there's a power above that. Now, one of the reasons why this is important for us to realize, now I have never had immediately, in a way that I've seen and heard, a spiritual experience of either angelic presence or demonic presence. But there are some people that have. There are some people that could say, I have been in a location, I've been in a room, and I had a strong sense of the peaceful presence of God's angelic powers. And there are some that would say, I have been in a location where I've experienced a dark, demonic presence. And I couldn't just think it was just me in some strange experience that I had in my mind that was just purely psychological. No, it was truly spiritual. And there is a temptation, and I happen to know of a young girl who has a boyfriend of sorts, and that boyfriend is deeply involved in spiritual things that are not of God. And you think, oh, you could just dismiss it. Oh, that's no big deal. They play with the Ouija board, or they do those. And you got to realize there are powers of darkness. While we may not have a personal experience ourselves, those powers and experiences, young people who are looking for a powerful experience, they will try to find it somewhere. And these spiritual things are out there. But the mistake that these people make as they look at these Ouija boards and things like that is they don't realize, yes, there are spiritual forces involved with this, but what they need to understand, that there is a power above the spiritual forces above. It's the power of the one on the throne that's even above these powers. And everybody, even these beings, are going to have to submit to the power above the crystal expanse, the one surrounding by that rainbow halo above. And this being here speaks. And this is what's happening. When I saw it, I fell on my face and heard a voice speaking. Then he said to me, Son of man, stand on your feet that I may speak with you. Here, this heavenly experience, apparently what had happened, Ezekiel had probably fallen down on his hands and knees, thinking, how am I going to handle this figure above me is speaking to me? But here, this voice is saying, yes, you, as an ordinary human, a human person. That's what that phrasing within here, Son of Man, is an acknowledgement. You are a human being, but I'm going to speak with you because you have a job. And this is what we need to be teaching and reminding ourselves. Heaven speaks now, and heaven says you have a responsibility. Son of man, stand on your feet that I may speak with you. As he spoke to me, the Spirit entered me and set me on my feet, and I heard him speaking to me. Then he said, Son of man, I am sending you to the sons of Israel, to a rebellious people who have rebelled against me. and they transgressed against me. And they're stubborn. They're obstinate. Your purpose, your duty, your heavenly commission purpose is not going to be easy, because the people you're going to talk to are stubborn and obstinate. As for them, whether they listen or not, they are a rebellious house. They will know that a prophet has been among them. Ezekiel, as you're living in this culture, in this society, you have a mission to speak to these people, to tell them, and you need to understand this is a commission that's coming up above. See, the people that are entranced with spiritual beings in this realm, they don't consider there's authority above that. And Ezekiel needed to have the idea, I can speak to people in power here, even though they're influenced by spiritual powers, because my commission comes from one above that. I have a heavenly commission. And you, son of man, neither fear them nor fear their words. Though thistles and thorns are with you, and you sit on scorpions, neither fear their words nor be dismayed at their presence, for they are a rebellious house. But you shall speak my words to them, whether they listen or not, for they are rebellious. Now you, son of man, listen to what I'm speaking to you. Do not be rebellious like that rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I am giving you. Why do we eat? For nourishment. And what's the purpose of nourishment? Keep your body functioning so that your function can do something. We eat in order to act. That's what the purpose of eating is for. Now, a lot of people, we eat in order to sit on the couch. But the purpose of eating is for activity. And Ezekiel is going to need to eat. But let's see. Then I looked, and behold, a hand was extended to me, and lo, a scroll was in it. He spread it out before me. There were lamentations, mourning, and woe. And what Ezekiel is told to do, which I don't have a slide for, but in chapter 3, then he said to me, Son of man, eat what you find, eat this scroll, and go speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he fed me this scroll. In other words, Ezekiel, consume my message into your body. Find your nourishment into my message that I speak to you, so that you can be active in speaking here in the earthly realm. Do we have a heavenly message given to us? The gospel of Jesus Christ, the message conveyed through the Scriptures. And what's the purpose of the Scriptures? It is to nourish us so that we then can go speak it, act it out, live it out among the people. Now here we've got all of this fancy vision here. We move to the book of Revelation. Now, we're not going to look at all these messages to the churches in Revelation. We might go through Revelation at a later time. But there's some interesting discussions among commentators about the book of Revelation. And if you're familiar with the book of Revelation, John is told to write a series of letters to 7 churches and he's to address it to the angel of the church in Ephesus. Now, there's a lot of debate. Who is this angel? Now, the thing about this word, angel, to the angelos of the church in Ephesus, to the angelos of the church in Smyrna, to the angelos of the church in Pergamum, to the angelos of the church in Thyatira, to the angelos of the church in Sardis, angelos of the church in Philadelphia, angelos of the church in Laodicea. Now that word angelos means, you could translate it, what it means in English is messenger. Now the question is, well, who's the messenger? Now some believe that it might be the one that is the overseer, or what we call the pastor of the church. These 7 churches. These are known churches in Western Asia Minor, or modern-day Turkey. If you've ever seen one of those maps, you know where Turkey is. But it's also something that some would say, maybe this messenger, yeah, it could be the pastor of these congregations, but it also possibly could actually be what we typically think of as an angel. In other words, you can see that word angelos, should it be rendered angel? And the question would be, do we have a concept that each congregation, at least in the first century, has a spiritual angel that has some influence on the congregation, and this angel would not only have a duty to influence the pastor, but of course a pastor pastors a congregation, and so that angel would need to influence the congregation. And there are different spiritual battles that are going on in these 7 churches. As you look at the book of Revelation, as you look at those letters to the 7 churches, you find that some of these churches have got a mighty, powerful spiritual ministry, and some of them are just playing games. And one of the things that we begin to realize is that the activity of a congregation is always an activity of spiritual power. And if it's spiritual power, it is heavenly power. Because after these congregations, these angels are addressed, whether it be the overseer pastor pastoring over a congregation, or whether it actually be an address to the angel, the spiritual power, what happens after that? Vision. Let me just go through this. We'll go through it a little bit more in detail, but let us take a look at some of the vision here. After these things, behold, a door standing open in heaven, and the voice first voice which I'd heard, like the sound of a trumpet speaking with me, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after these things." Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was standing in heaven, and one sitting on the throne. And he who was sitting was like a jasper stone and a sardius in appearance. And there was a rainbow around the throne, like an emerald in appearance. Once again, as we continue to look, rather than seeing this from below, John, where is he seeing it? He's seeing it up above. He's experiencing this. Around the throne were 24 thrones. Upon the thrones I saw 24 elders, clothed with white garments and golden crowns on their heads. Out of the throne, flashes of thunder, peals of thunder, 7 lamps of fire. And here in verse 6, "And before the throne there was something like a sea of glass, like crystal, and in the center and around the throne 4 living creatures full of eyes in front and behind." Here John is seeing this crystal expanse, not from down here, but up above here, and he's seeing 4 living creatures. The first creature was like a lion, the second creature like a calf, the third creature had a face like that of a man, and the fourth creature was like a flying eagle, which is the description that you also see in the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel saw this from below. John is seeing it, experiencing it up above. But the point of this is to say, the power of heaven is active within the world that we know. It is active in the spiritual powers in this time that we're living in. But it's a reminder in the book of Revelation, the power of God's activity is happening at the same time as all the busyness that's going on down here. When we think of heaven, we should not merely think of it as, that's the place I'll go when I die. When we think of heaven, we need to think in terms of, this is the power that is authoritative and has more power over all the busyness of here. It's working its power. God on his throne is working his power in all of this busyness. We don't just have to wait till we die to experience something of the activity of heaven. And these visions that we get, whether it be Ezekiel or whether it be the visions that John goes through, is to say, heaven is at work right now. Have hope. Don't despair. Stay faithful, because heaven is active. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Lord, we come to you. There are many times there are such activities and circumstances and powers and influences that have a whole lot more power than we have. There's a whole lot more activity in forces of darkness, in forces of deception and temptation, and we can despair and think that we are so small that there's nothing we can do, and we have a tendency to be complacent, or instead to be conformed to the world. Lord, may we have, by the word you've given us, may we consume it, and may we realize that the power of heaven is still working amidst the chaos of the days in which we live, and that while we may live in a land where other people seem to have influence, may we realize that your power, your activity is still going on, and we should remain faithful and active with our commission of our duties in the midst of the land in which we are. And we pray these things and pray that you would give us your guidance. Amen. Now let's just have a little bit of time of intercession. What in particular do we need to lift up in prayer? Of course, we need to lift up the Glenn Williams family. Is there anything else we need to lift up?
Jimmy Price family.